Before we get to this video, I want to say huge and very late thanks to Sean and Nicholas for the pledge on Patreon. You guys are fantastic. Cyberpunk 2077 is the hottest game that people are talking today. Can't blame them. The game looks amazing, and the E3 announcement with the reveal of Keanu Reeves being in the game got people to talk about it again. But Cyberpunk 2077 is not without its controversies, and we're gonna be talking about, well, at least one of them today. In the previous Cyberpunk controversy, I mainly talk about something that a lot of progressives got confused on, which is the idea of transhumanism, an idea that they expect Cyberpunk 2077 to explore, which it does, but it's not in a way that they wanted it to be. So in my understanding, transhumanism is the idea that human beings can evolve beyond its physical and mental capabilities. When I hear that word, I imagine augmentations or cybernetic and biological enhancements applied to the human body. I never once thought that it's something to do with trans people, but apparently some progressives, including this interviewer from Eurogamer, thought that it has everything to do with being trans. In fact, the original Cyberpunk board game has this mechanic where if you decide to undergo a sex change, you will lose part of your humanity, a stat that if driven down enough results in cyberpsychosis, where you lose control of the character and the game master takes over. Ooh, wow, that is weirdly and scarily accurate. But the whole gender fluidity thing is not the controversy of today. It's somewhat related, but it's not the controversy for today. I've talked about that in detail in my last video. Instead, I want to talk about this other really stupid and inane stuff. It all started when I encountered this writer for the Daily Dot who quoted a Eurogamer article talking about the controversial Cyberpunk 2077 poster. We'll get to the poster later on, but the response here is very interesting.
I didn't slap the penis there for people to laugh about it. There's a beautiful body there being used to sell soda. Your intention is not the same as your art's messages. Many artists have good intentions that are polluted with internalized transphobia. This is why we have sensitivity readers.
This brings us to a very interesting philosophical discussion. If a game developer depicts something without the intent to cause offense, but it still causes offense anyway, how are we going to depict something that doesn't cause offense? How can we guarantee that something that we do as an artist will not cause offense? What will guarantee these sensitivity readers to be effective in quenching all the offense being caused? And who the hell would really call themselves the sensitivity reader? I've seen NEETs with a more honorable job. We're living in a time where people can get offended by the smallest of things. For example, if you ask people on Reset Era that they should just play video game and have fun, you'll be banned for inflammatory drive-by. No, seriously. If the author's intent doesn't matter and we should create something for the purpose of not offending people, then what kind of art that can we make out of it? What piece of creative work that would guarantee zero offense? Who would enjoy that type of art? Who would buy that type of art? Or here's a better question. Why even bother trying? You cannot please everyone, especially this writer over here. So what's the point of trying to cater into a small group of people whose sole purpose in life is to be offended and who doesn't care about context and nuances as long as they try to be a martyr to an oppressed group in real life? Like this one writer from Rock Paper Shotgun. The context and nuance doesn't matter. Why? Because trans people in real life got hurt. Sorry, writer, but this game is not trying to be a megaphone for your stupid activism. So let's get into that poster that causes so much distress. So you have this poster, and the first time I look at it, I thought to myself, why is this poster causing so much offense? I mean, sure, the character has a dong, but so what? I didn't notice what's so troubling about it. But then again, I'm a normal human being and these people are on a different level. Anyway, the interviewer asked the original artist, and the answer is pretty simple and reasonable. It's to highlight the sexual exploitation of men, women, and people in between, to highlight the cyberpunk dystopia. It makes sense within the context of the game. You wouldn't depict a dystopian future without the elements of sexual exploitation. That'd be ridiculous and nonsensical. But here's the thing, even if you remove the notion that the game sexually exploits men, women, and people in between, that would still not be good enough. A similar criticism happened to Cuphead years ago when this writer talked about how Cuphead has roots in racist cartoons, but the big problem here is that the writer criticized Cuphead for not showing how racist the past was, or whitewashing and being shy from it. I imagine that a similar scenario would happen to Cyberpunk if the poster or any elements of sexual exploitation in the game just doesn't exist or being whitewashed. In fact, it'd be way worse and nonsensical if the game doesn't depict any sorts of elements on sexual exploitation. So this poster makes sense within context, and it's designed to be terrible and sexually exploitative. It's designed as a way to represent the state of the world that they're living in, a place where human beings are exploited because they look sexually appealing. So to put this hoopla into perspective, it's like being mad at the Caesar's Legion from Fallout New Vegas for enslaving people, or being mad at the Führer because he's trying to take over the world with space aliens, or being mad at the Joker because he kills people. That's the point. And again, even if you remove any sorts of sexual exploitation elements in the game, which would make the universe to not make any sense, it would still be offensive because it's whitewashing and not confronting the harsh reality of the futuristic dystopia that in some ways reflective to the real world. So you can't depict the reality because it's offensive, but you can't also whitewash reality because it's offensive. You can't win with these people. But hey, let's get in depth into the OP's thoughts on this stupid poster.
Deeply transphobic ad in Cyberpunk 2077 represents everything wrong with Cyberpunk.
Yes, that's the reality of the cyberpunk dystopia. It's a world filled with horrendous crisis, poverty, the rise of crime, and of course, sexual exploitation. People love this game and many other cyberpunk stories because it depicts the harsh reality of the dystopian future. This article is you, writer, stating the plainly obvious. Or is it? So let's get to it.
The cyberpunk dystopia is here. No, not the one we're living in. CD Projekt Cyberpunk 2077 is coming to PC and consoles early next year. But just like our own, Cyberpunk's dystopia has a transphobia problem.
Yes, that's the point. The world of cyberpunk is not designed to be politically correct. And most importantly, it's not designed for the faintest of hearts, such as you. The writer highlighted a tweet that went viral, and by that I mean it has 2,000 likes and 500 retweets. I'm putting this up because I want to highlight this interaction.
Oof, yikes, what even is this? It's a video game.
Wow, what do you say after that one? Brutal, savage, wrecked. Absolutely taken down.
The writer continues by providing a statement from the game's art director, saying that for the art director, the person is sexy. She likes how the person looks, but the model is used for corporations to display just as a thing. In other words, the poster was used to highlight sexual exploitation in the cyberpunk dystopia. That's the entire point, writer. If that's what you consider transphobia, sorry to say this, but that's just the harsh reality of the setting that you're talking about. This is you complaining that the Empire is oppressive. Thank you, Captain Obvious. The writer then highlights a tweet from someone asking if the game would have some real positive depictions of trans and genderqueer people in the game. Sorry, but this is the cyberpunk dystopia. Everyone is going to be an asshole to varying degrees of capacity, and even if we depict the trans character as positively as possible, we still get complaints because she's trapping a dude to have sex with her. That's a topic for my other video. She then asked the question, is your target audience going to see a nuanced depiction of an all-consuming culture that hypersexualizes queer bodies for profit, or are they going to chortle at the chick with a dick? Here's the problem. You can't make a criticism towards the culture of sexual exploitation without showing the sexual exploitation itself. Me is supposed to be a critique to the whole anime waifu otaku culture, but that doesn't stop people from jacking off to the girl in the video. Same goes to the poster. The intent for the poster is to be sexually provocative. You can't make the point that the poster is sexual exploitation if the poster isn't sexually provocative. There will be people, including in the real world too, who likes chicks with dicks, who like this poster and chortle on it. Did they get the intended message? Certainly not. Will they stop chortling on the poster? Probably not. Does it matter? No, it doesn't. Going back to the me video, just because you criticize an element of our sexualized culture doesn't mean that everyone will get the message, and it certainly doesn't mean that people won't jack off to it. The discussion of whether or not it's okay to use sexiness as marketing is another topic entirely, a topic that I'm pretty sure you have a very negative opinion on. The question here is whether or not it's okay for the game to depict that culture, and the answer is yes, the game has to depict the culture. It wouldn't make sense otherwise. Just because some people jack off to the critique doesn't mean that the critique isn't there. It seems to me that you have an issue with cis people jerking off to trans people. That is not your business. But you're a Puritan, so of course it is.
But while in-game lore may tell one story, real-world context tells another. The ad feels heavy-handed at best, and it relies too much on the shock of an unexpected, enormous erection to get its point across. In other words, the ad isn't jarring because of its capitalist ideals, it's because of its trans model's penis.
Well, yes. It's sexual exploitation for trans people depicted in a dystopian future of the game. It's a thing that happens in the game. I don't see why this is bad. Your entire point is that it sexualizes trans people. So, it's a dystopian future. Everyone in the game will be sexualized in some way or another. You don't get special treatment just because you're trans. An idea that you unfortunately have to accept to anything else in the real world.
It also fetishizes the owner's genitals without immediately offering any satire that reflects Redesiuk's values. So for players who read the model as a trans woman, it's as if she's visibly thrusting one of her most stigmatized body parts onto others, like she wants the viewers to recognize her penis in its entire length and girth. It makes the model, not the society that they live in, seems predatory.
Well, that's your interpretation, writer, and it's a bad interpretation if you ask me.
Even if the ad is supposed to depict a trans woman or a trans femme in good faith, it's terribly inaccurate in a way that furthers harmful stereotype already existing in our society. Many trans women cannot maintain erections thanks to hormone replacement therapy, while others can only become somewhat stiff for a short period of time without erectile dysfunction medication.
Writer, this is a video game taking place in a fictional universe, and not real life? Can you please stop talking about real-world issues that concern you? Or is that the point of the conversation? This poster is problematic because it's an idealized fantasy version of what actual trans people are in real life, and it doesn't represent trans people in real life. Yes. What's wrong with that? And even in real life, I certainly don't expect someone who have erectile dysfunction to be featured in porn. But even then, there's a kink to that too.
In other words, the ad reflects cisgender people's current conception of trans bodies, so for most cis players, the satire doesn't land.
No, it does land. The poster does highlight the sexual exploitation culture of the cyberpunk dystopia. Your criticism is that the trans person being depicted is not accurate to the real world and a product of fantasization from cis people who wants to jerk off to it. Yes, writer, that's the point of this poster. It's supposed to sell a product through fantasy. If it's based on reality, then it misses the point of the satire. You fundamentally misunderstood the point of this poster because you don't find the depiction accurate to real life, and some people jerk off to it. The poster is meant to sell a fantasy, and if people in the real world looks at that and say, wow, I'm gonna jerk off to that, then I think it conveys the message successfully. I mean, to be honest, this poster can be both, right? It can be used as a way to highlight the game's sexual exploitation culture, but since it's a sexually provocative poster, it can also be used as a way to sexually stimulate those who have a kink on it. Nothing wrong with either, but I know which part that you have the biggest issue on.
And it calls into question whether CD Projekt Red ever intended the ad to be satirical in the first place. Right-wing gamers clearly didn't think so. Over on 4chan's poll, one user posted the ad and proudly declared Cyberpunk 2077 our game, implying the title's politics align with the site's far-right beliefs. And on Gamergate subreddit r Kotaku in action, users praised the joke and belittled its critics.
So, people you don't like responded positively to the ad, and therefore it's not satire. At this moment, you are assuming malicious intent from the developer's part. I'd recommend you to back away from this critique because I can easily interpret this as you saying that the developers are right-wing trolls. The writer has one tweet that I find interesting. Some gamer said, "The cyberpunk joke isn't disrespectful. Don't you want to normalize girl dick?" And then the writer is struggling now that she has to explain the nuances and fetishization and the cis gays today. Cis gays? So the entire issue here is that you have a problem with people jerking off to you. You just don't like seeing trans people being sold as a sexual fantasy, even in a fictional setting where something like that is very likely to happen, especially if the trans people in question are fantasies for cis people. Don't worry, writer, we get the message. You're jealous that this chick with a dick has more people jerking off to it compared to you. Considering the horrendous takes that you had for the past couple of paragraphs, I really can't blame people for staying the hell away from you. you. So let's proceed to criticize other things in the game.
At first blush, it's hard to tell whether CD Projekt Red's Chromanticore joke really was intended to be a dog whistle, but that seems increasingly likely as previews of the E3 Cyberpunk 2077 demo come out. Rock Paper Shotgun's Matt Cox felt increasingly uncomfortable after playing through the demo mission, which has players endlessly shoot predominantly black people labeled as animals. The enemy's faction is called the Animals.
So if it's white people being labeled as animals being endlessly shot, that's perfectly fine. You do realize that black gang members exist in real life? You do realize that Mike Pondsmith is the creator of Cyberpunk itself? Or are you going to pull the internalized racism card?
Another scene features the player character seemingly making fun of the stereotypical Haitian voodoo boys crime organization's accents.
Oh no, people are being racist in a cyberpunk dystopia. The absolute horror.
The demo ends with a white man in a business suit correctly warning the player that the voodoo boys will turn on them. It reads as a white upperclassman helping the player deal with violent black criminals.
That's your wild interpretation, and that's not necessarily correct. By that logic, Resident Evil 5 is... You know what? I'm not gonna get to that. I think you all get the point.
Combined with CD Projekt Red's history with transphobic and questionable humor, it's hard to see the Chromanticore as in an affirming light, even with Redisuke's explanation.
And there you go. You just straight up assume malicious intent. The most hilarious part on this entire debacle is that when the writer contacted CD Projekt Red on this article, CD Projekt Red directed her to the interview by Polygon and declined to comment further. Glad that I'm not the only one who is absolutely tired of this crap. This is exactly the perfect response to this entire hoopla. Decline to comment because these people are terrible and they have terrible ideas. So to sum up this ridiculous hoopla, there's a poster featuring a chick with a dick. Progressives don't like it because it's sexual exploitation of trans people, even though that's the entire point of the poster, and the trans person in question is a fictional character in a fictional setting. You cannot win with these people because it's their interpretation that matters, even though their interpretation is always without a question negative, and there's nothing that you can do to please these people. Also, they are wrong. Always wrong. To all game developers out there, just focus on making good games and don't respond to these people's comments. They're not your audiences. They're there to steal all the fun. You cannot have fun in current year. It's inflammatory drive-by.